Kim Jong-un's sister met with South Korean President Moon Jae-in and invited President Moon to visit the North Korean capital. Well, this happened as U.S. relations with North Korea continue to deteriorate following a year of nuclear aggression, as well as the imprisonment and death of U.S. student Otto Warmbier. Warmbier's father traveled to the Olympic Games and spoke exclusively with NBC about his feelings about being on the Korean Peninsula.
Their athletes are not exchanging ideas with other athletes in the Olympic Village or really participating. So that's a political statement, and this is not political for me. Their treatment of Otto is their standard. That's the way they do business.
How will these two countries' cooperation affect U.S. policy toward the North and their growing nuclear ambitions? Here to discuss are the director of the Korea Working Group, professor at the Harvard Kennedy School, John Park, and former CIA Deputy Division Chief for Korea, that's Bruce Klingner. Bruce, let me start with you. There's a lot of talk about what the environment needs to be like for South Korea and North Korea to come to the table for this visit to take place in North Korea. What's that environment got to look like to you?
Well, it may differ between what the U.S. would like South Korea to do as well as what the South Korean president would see. There's concern that President Moon is much more eager to engage in diplomacy or an engagement with the North without conditionality and reciprocity. So Vice President Pence was in South Korea to sort of counter the North Korean propaganda message and remind South Korea of the need to maintain pressure, and including the enforcement of the required UN sanctions.
John Park, let me ask you about the U.S. role in all of this. I just want to read from a statement that the Vice President gave on his trip to South Korea. He said, "There is no daylight between the United States, the Republic of Korea, and Japan on the need to continue to isolate North Korea economically and diplomatically until they abandon their nuclear ballistic missile program." I wonder, first of all, how likely it is we would see an abandonment of that program, and second, if you think the U.S. has to be a little more flexible here as we go toward these potential meetings.
Sure, David, in terms of the likelihood of the denuclearization part, we're not seeing that. If anything, North Korea is digging its heels in. Kim Jong-un in his New Year's address stated that this year North Korea will begin mass-producing nuclear weapons, continuing with the quantitative aspect of this nuclear weapons program for self-defense, as the North Koreans claim it. And related to the other piece of it, if you look at the U.S. approach to dealing with this particular issue of North Korea's continued threat to American security, the focus is primarily on maximum pressure, and that's coordinating very closely with the South Korean and Japanese allies. However, on the engagement piece, the formal title of the U.S. policy towards North Korea is maximum pressure and engagement. We see President Moon on the engagement part, but we're not seeing the coordination, and that's the troubling piece.
Bruce, I want to ask you just about the messaging that we've seen from the U.S. Over the last couple of days as Mike Pence has made his way to Japan and then to South Korea. His communications director tweeting this, to recap VP Pence's night at opening ceremony last night, VP stands and cheers for U.S. athletes. VP hangs out with U.S. athletes instead of dining with Kim regime. VP does not applaud North Korea or exchange pleasantries with the most oppressive regime on earth. What's the message here that Washington, that the White House is trying to send from Mike Pence's visit to South Korea?
Well, the U.S. administration is trying to counter this charm offensive by North Korea. The day before the Olympic ceremony, North Korea had another parade where they displayed the ICBMs that are increasingly threatening the American homeland. So the Vice President is trying to counter that message, the ferocious tiger image of the day before, and then the cute and cuddly kitten of North Korea walking in under a single unification flag with the South Korean counterpart. So the U.S. is trying to remind everyone of the human rights violations, the threat not only to the U.S. but also to our allies.
John, last question to you. I look in the photos there of the booth last night at the Olympic Stadium. I see the North Korean leader's sister there with the nominal head of state. What can you tell us about those two individuals, the man and the woman charged here with bringing this invitation to South Korea?
Sure, the dynamics are really interesting. You have Kim Jong-nam, who is the ceremonial head of state of North Korea, clearly a gentleman in his latter years, and then you have this very young female member of the Kim family who is rising in the ranks in the regime as well. So the contrasts are quite striking. In terms of the deference that the South Koreans are portraying here, in terms of treating Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong here, with that type of respect and status, we're seeing a dynamics where the direct linkage and the direct overtures to the Kim family, that That's very pronounced here. But the question is, where will this all lead to? We know that at the end of the Winter Olympics, there's supposed to be the resumption of U.S.-South Korean military exercises, and that's where we're waiting to see how this type of overture and this early connection, how long and how durable this will be.
Thanks to both of you. Appreciate it. That's John Park and Bruce Klingner joining me here this afternoon. And scandal sweeping the White House following the departure of 2 staffers amid domestic abuse allegations, and President